Hello, this is our presentation about policy intervention and the relative incomes of families with children by family structure and parental education. The other consider how welfare state intervention affects a broad range of families that differ in key characters such as family structure and parental education. The other forces on welfare state in Europe and North America between 1985 and 2007. First, elucidate which household benefit from different policy settings. Second, most policies did not have different association with the income of mothers with different levels of education. Third, tax policy is relative to changes relative to paternal education. Fourth, child care policy are associated with income differences between single and two-parent households. This part is about the welfare state and the stratification. The welfare state is a health system because it actively minimizes pursuit or exacerbates inequality. The welfare state includes policies that provide transfers, such as benefits for families with children, and services such as public subsidies or the provision of child care. The welfare state also includes broader labor market and tax policies. The association between policy and relative household income is studied from two dimensions. First, focus on family structure, single mother across countries and highly vulnerable to low incomes. Changes in family structure such as separation and divorce are significantly detrimental to women's incomes, although this change has little effect on men's incomes and living standards. Second, focus on education. The higher the education level, the higher the wages, the higher the multiplicity, the lower the income, and the higher the poverty risk. Education inequality creates higher levels of income inequality. About social rights of citizens. In fact, some policies provide households with economic resources through direct transfer or the provision of services, indicating that households are entitled to a little financial security. Other policies provide resources through different access to schemes such as pensions and the tax systems that may strengthen employment as central to citizenship. This page is about summary of happens that affected of each policy variable by education and family structure. Higher or lower marginal tax rate at the top of the income distribution may not change the income gap between households unless there is a progressive income tax structure in which higher income groups bear more of the tax burden. About progress tax structures are designed to redistribute income, those at the bottom of the income distribution. Experience both in income in light of the progress tax under the action, the income will increase. Families with highly educated parents should have lower relative income than those with moderate education parents because of the more progress income tax. Single-parent households have higher incomes under progress tax systems. Regarding coordinated wages, the occupation that is most affected by wage coordination is workers. So less educated parental families should have higher incomes in the context of centrally coordinated wages. Minimum wage. Regarding the minimum wage, surveys and studies have found that families with less educated parents should have higher incomes when the minimum wage is higher than those with moderately educated parents. The same single-parent families benefit from the minimum wage. About allowance in countries where family allowance are more progress, the risk of personal poverty is lower. As a result, the study found that more generous families allowance could protect some families from financial poverty. Public subsidies. About public subsidies, in terms of public subsidies, family policy should unlimitedly provide greater economic security for families, reducing the cost of work for families, and families with lower income directly benefit from public subsidies. Regarding maternity leave and paid leave, the higher the education level, the more benefit. This page is about the time span. This data is 22 years, from 1985 to 2007. The total number of countries included in this analysis is 16, which translates to 75 separate size of country. The study limited the sample to households living in the same household as children under 18, with mothers between the age of 25 to 49. About the dependent variable in the research, the dependent variable relative income is measured as total household disposable income divided by survived specific median income. For research purposes, income was divided by median income, as the main focus is on the relative income of households with different levels of education and family structure. This method can compare the income of multiple countries over multiple periods under different policy regimes. Income was recorded in the regression analysis to standardize the distribution. The study is a relative measure of household income, which captures incomes inequally within a country by focusing on relative income in a specific country. About the independent variable in the research, first, the main family level independent variable were mother's education, parents' education, and partner status. Second, the variable controlled for the mother's age, the mother's employment status, and others employment adults in the household, including the spouse and the partner. Third, the main independent variable and the country level is policy. Fourth, which condition is captured through an index that summarizes how wages are negotiated in each country.
This page is about analyze strategy. Analyze dependent variables with multi-level modeling. Multi-level random effects models are necessary because both individual and country level variables are included, as well as the clustered nature of the data. This modeling strategy allows us to assess the relationship between policy and relative household income, taking into account the fact that individuals are clustered across service and countries. This modeling strategy also allows us to resolve longitudinal and cross-sectional effects. This page is about longitudinal change in income. To gain further insight into longitudinal effects, we looked at changes in average household income over time, regardless of whether we were discussing mother or partner, with little change over time in the relative income of highly educated households, and in the least educated households among parents. Their incomes continued to decline over time. The effect was especially strong for mothers with low level of education. The top of each bar reflects the average relative income of households with highly educated partners. The bottom of each bar affects the average relative income of households with less educated partners. The white dashes in each bar reflect the average relative income of households with secondary education partners. Income inequality appears to have increased over time, especially among households with less educated parents and single-parent households. The results in these tables confirm the research as the distribution of income based on education or partnership status among families with children is largest in the United States and the lowest in countries such as Sweden. Countries such as Sweden and Finland are less polarized, perhaps because of the influence of more generous welfare state policies. Income disparities are much larger among different educational groups in countries like US, Italy, and so on. Table percent slopes and robust standard errors from a single multi-level model, including longitudinal and cross-sectional effects. Each macro effect interacted with mother's education, partner's education, and the single mother statute. The first column of data represents the slope, and the second column represents the standard error. We find that the countries with the highest average GDP, the income gap between families with low educated mothers and those with moderately educated mothers is the largest, and the gap increases significantly during period of GDP growth, scaled higher. To help interpret the regression result, tables present the population mean and mean deviation over time for each economic and policy variable. Average GDP was $28,997 across all time periods and countries. The average deviation from the mean shows that the GDP of wave 2 was $5,798 below the mean, and that the GDP of wave 7 was $7,444 above the mean, with steady increases over time. So going back to the negative longitudinal effect of GDP on households with less educated mothers, shown in this table, we can conclude that economic growth increase inequality between some households over time. This supports previous research on aggregate measure of income inequality, as it has shown that in the global post-industrial era, unlike previous eras, economic growth has actually increased rather than decreased inequality. To clarify the interpretation of the result, we plotted the predicted relative income of households with children based on the significant result in the previous table. This chart predicts relative income on the y-axis based on the mother's education, and the percentiles of the longitudinal GDP variable on the x-axis for household category. A value of relative income less than 1 reflects income below the median because income is divided by the median income. We found that the relative income gap between households with less educated mothers and other households increase as GDP increases over time. And this is a summary. The first one is the research object was to understand changes in income inequality between households over time and across countries, and how these changes relate to specific welfare state policies. And the second, some policies have an impact on stratification as defined by relative income, although the policies do not profoundly change the stratification system. The third, tax policy helps predict change in relative income across households based on a partner's education, as the income gaps are smaller during periods of more progressive taxation. The fourth policy, childcare policies, are productive strategy to support single-parent families. The fifth, the welfare state policies can reduce inequality between households, but also appear to maintain existing income hierarchies. Thank you for your watching.